Hi, my name is Julian Paradian. You can call me Jules. This video explores what inner guidance is, how to reliably access it, and why you'd want to. So, what is inner guidance? So, the truth is, I actually don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm fairly certain from my own experiences and from talking with others that it's not the conscious left brain and that it's not the id inner child part of the subconscious. It feels to me quite different from either of these modes of consciousness. My best guess is that it's either some other part of the subconscious or it's the higher self, but it could be something else entirely. In my experience, it's a lot more effective than our normal decision making modes, um, i.e., the conscious mind or the id, as Freud would call it. Um, the ego, conscious mind, left brain thinks in pros and cons. It relies on its limited assumptions and information being complete and correct, which is almost never the case. Um, and it can be swayed by faulty logic, uh, either um, your own or other people's. Um, and the conscious mind, its decision making methods can lead to analysis paralysis, which I am often a victim of. um, and it can be wrong. It is often wrong. Um, the id, inner child, whatever you want to call that, um, on the other hand, is impulsive, short sighted, and can be swayed by shiny things and charismatic people who may or may not have your best interests in mind. And it can also be wrong, and frequently is. Inner guidance, in my experience, is always right, even when it doesn't make sense. Um, Inner guidance, uh, I find, will sometimes disagree with my conscious mind and will sometimes disagree with my inner child impulsive wants. Um, but if I follow my inner guidance, it is always right, and it always has my best interests in mind. So I think the best way of describing this is the result in life, what life is like when not listening to inner guidance. I find it's pretty random. It's often rough and difficult, even when I'm trying my best. Um, what life is like when I'm listening to my inner guidance, it's much easier, smoother. It's just much better for me. Um, Things often seem to just fall into place in ways that I couldn't have foreseen. Um, and for my part, I would always rather you listen to your inner guidance over me or anyone else for that matter. So long as I'm alive in this body, I'm just a human. There are a lot of benefits to being a human. Omniscience is not one of them. I can't know what's best for you. Only you can know that. So I can post things on this channel and make them available to you, but I would always urge you to listen to your own inner guidance first before listening to, watching, or doing anything that I or anyone else shares with you. So, the basics for how to listen to inner guidance. Um, I'm just going to describe to you what I do. I ask myself usually a yes or no or either or question. I find it's much easier when it's just two options. Um, it can be done with more options, but it gets more complicated. Um, so, for example, some friends invite me to go hang out with them, and I ask my inner guidance, should I accept this invitation to go hang out with friends? And then there's kind of an implied either or there for me, which is or go home. My left brain thinking, if I use my left brain for this, my left brain thinking would be going over pros and cons. Like pros, it could feel really good to build more camaraderie with these friends. I might need that in my life. Cons might be, well, I'm an introvert, so it could be draining and I could end up worse off afterwards. But if I instead, and I could get tied up in that pros and cons weighing forever. um, and my, inner child id, part of my subconscious might be um, very like gut feeling like they're going for pizza. I want pizza, and want to use that as the basis for making a decision. um, and my left brain decision making could be right, could be wrong. It's kind of a toss. Same with the inner child type reasoning, if you could call it that. But if I use my inner guidance, it will give me an answer that I may or may not like. But whatever the answer is going to end up being the right thing for me. It is possible to do this with more than two options by focusing on each option in turn and checking with inner guidance about each one. Um, so, what does checking with inner guidance actually mean? When I ask myself that yes or no question or that either or question, I feel for this very subtle good or yes feeling or a bad or no feeling um, in response to the yes or no question. And that feeling, what it can be like, uh, as a feeling, sometimes it just feels right or it feels wrong. Sometimes it feels if it's a yes, it can feel expansive, like oh, I can breathe. um, versus if it's a no, it can feel contracted, like harder to breathe. A yes can feel like a glowy feeling in my chest. A no can feel like heavy or just a nothing, like a numbness. Um, Also, a yes can feel I can feel physically stronger or energetic, and a no can feel I can feel weaker or lethargic. Essentially, it's very variations on yes is like feeling more alive and no is feeling more dead. Sometimes it's more than just a feeling. Sometimes I'll get words, like I'll actually hear in my mind, I'll hear a yes or I'll hear a no. Um, Sometimes I'll get visuals. Again, it'll be like in my mind's eye, I'll get a sense of light or a sense of dark. Um, Light meaning yes, dark meaning no. Um, Sometimes I'll get almost an image of a head nodding for yes or shaking for no. Um, and sometimes if it's uh, like a direction type thing, I'll actually see a path show up that is showing me the right direction to go. Um, Again, this is just like it's like my imagination showing me, and that's what it looks like. Ultimately, it requires experimentation to find out how it manifests for you. Um, but it's going to be subtle, especially to start with, which I find leads me to second guess myself, especially when I was first starting to do this. Um, I would wonder, how do I know if I'm doing this right? Um, First of all, it doesn't have to make sense. That's the one thing I wish someone had been around to tell me. Um, it's, in fact, sometimes the fact that the answer doesn't make sense is actually the best sign that it's a genuine intuition. I would say um, the most helpful thing for me for figuring out whether or not I was doing it right was to watch the results. Does my life get better? And I found that I was hearing my inner guidance even in the beginning. Uh, I was hearing it correctly a lot more often than I would have thought. So I tended to second guess myself too much, actually. But that's what learning is, right? Um, and it does get easier and clearer with practice. So as far as figuring out, am I doing this right? I would say pay attention to the results. Are they making your life? Are these decisions following this feeling? Is it making your life better? If so, then you're doing it right. um, and practice. Um, I got to the point where I was doing it. Eventually, I started trusting it, and I was doing it for every decision, big or small. Like big decisions, absolutely, but even like which socks am I going to wear today? Small decisions, that kind of thing. Um, and being in constant practice like that, even on little decisions, makes it so much easier to hear the inner guidance when the stakes are higher. So I can't recommend that highly enough, that constant practice. Um, and being in constant practice makes it just easier to it just makes it easier and clearer. So it's also faster. And I found that it got to the point where I could actually ask questions that were not just yes or no questions. I could actually ask more complex questions and get fairly clear answers um, to more complicated questions. Often in visuals, often what would happen is if I would ask like, um, uh, what should I have for dinner? Like I would get a visual of the dinner I should have um, showing up in my mind's eye. And aside from it just getting easier with constant practice, life this was a side effect I didn't expect and is so cool. Life just became so much less stressful because left brain decision making is stressful. Like weighing those pros and cons all the time, it's stressful. What if I get it wrong? Then it's on me. It's my fault if I got it wrong. Um, with this inner guidance, it's it does take a little mindfulness to be present to this very subtle feeling, um, but the mindfulness makes me mindful in my life in general, and that helps reduce the stress as well. And having um, this method of decision making that's so simple because it's really just asking a yes or no question and getting a yes or no answer. There's no weighing of pros and cons. It just takes the stress out of it. It makes it so much simpler. It's not always easy to follow the advice, especially if it's something that doesn't make sense. But I've found every time I follow it, even when it doesn't make sense, life just kind of ends up better. So that's you know the ultimate effect from following inner guidance for every decision, big or small, is that my life works. And hey, what more could you ask for? So yeah, I would highly recommend using inner guidance first before following anybody else's advice, including mine, um, and ahead of your own left brain thinking and ahead of your own inner child impulses. Because in my experience, it just works better. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments below. I would also love to hear about any experiments that you run and how they go.